Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Meetinghouse Arts. My name is Suzanne Watson. I'm the executive director here at Meetinghouse, located in downtown Freeport, if you didn't know that. I welcome you all here tonight to celebrate poetry, community, and the remarkable power of language. It feels especially meaningful to gather together during National Poetry Month, a time set aside to honor an art form that has, for centuries, helped us make sense of the world, to challenge it, to celebrate it, and sometimes simply to survive it. Poetry asks us to slow down in a culture that often asks us simply to speed up. It asks us to listen more and more carefully, to notice more deeply, to sit with complexity rather than rush towards easy answers. And in many ways, this is the heart of what Meetinghouse Arts strives for, and that is what we adhere in our work day to day to create that language that still has the power to move us, challenge us, illuminate us, and bring us closer to one another. So tonight, may we listen closely. May we be surprised. May we leave carrying a line, an image, or an idea that stays with us long after we walk out those doors. Thank you for supporting Meetinghouse Arts, for supporting artists, for recognizing that arts are one of the truest measures of a vibrant and thoughtful community. It's my pleasure to now welcome the Poets Laureate.
Wow. Thank you, Suzanne, so much. This is quite amazing. We have broken through the forgetful snow and have almost survived what's left of what T.S. Eliot called the cruelest month. This is, I think, an auspicious time for us to come together to honor and celebrate these fine poets. Not just because it's spring, and not just because it's National Poetry Month, but because it seems a pivotal time in history, and it is being written in many cases by liars. Poets, on the other hand, like many artists, are truth tellers, and as a result, over the centuries, poets have been hunted, arrested, disappeared, and even killed by governments for telling the truth. But not tonight, of course. Poets are warriors and will never stop telling the truth, even if it is impeccably dressed in simile, metaphor, or iambic pentameter. It brings me hope to know that poets will never stop telling the truth, will never stop shining our light on political injustice and social justice, and we will not stop illuminating all those little things which remind us we are human, remind us what we share, and remind us that we each need each other. I applaud you warrior poets and you poet warriors here today, and I thank you for this opportunity for us all. I am also grateful to our venue sponsor, Meetinghouse Arts, for welcoming us with open arms. Thank you so much, Suzanne and Meetinghouse Arts. Very grateful. I'm also grateful for our event sponsor, Kennebec Savings Bank. In their absence tonight, they have asked me if I would share this note with you, which I'm going to read verbatim. For over 150 years, Kennebec Savings Bank has been committed to the success of the customers and communities we serve. This year, we will contribute over $1.4 million to more than 350 nonprofit and community organizations in Kennebec and Cumberland counties. We are so proud to partner with organizations like Freeport, Folio et al. That enhance the culture in Maine. Thank you, Kennebec Savings, for helping make this event possible. I probably should have introduced myself. I'm not sure if I did, but my name is Jonas. Hi. I'm the president of a local nonprofit, Freeport, Folio, who was part of the committee that put this event together, and I'd like to take a moment to recognize the rest of the team, because I am also grateful to the team, starting with Gibson Fay LeBlanc, the executive director of the Maine Publishers and Writers Alliance. Gib, you want to stand up? Our current Maine Poet Laureate, Julia Bouwsma. You can wave. Noel Tague from University of Maine, Augusta, and also part of the Plunkett Festival team. Noel. And Maya Williams from Maine Poetry Out Loud, who was not able to join us tonight. And finally, the wonderful Christina Carrez from the Maine Arts Commission. Some of you may have heard this story, but I reached out to Christina last October. I was hoping to invite the 2026 Maine Poetry Out Loud champion, who was just recently named the State Poetry Out Loud champion, to participate in our open mic with featured poet Betsy Sholl a couple of weeks ago. Christina loved the idea and was so kind and gracious to me that I felt comfortable sharing with her a dream that I had to create this very event where we are right now. After I shared the thought with her, there was a long pause, and she quietly whispered, as you might guess, "That's my dream too." As a mentee of Baron Wormser, Christina not only liked the idea, but felt it was necessary. Necessary to honor these great people, these great poets. And so, with that shared dream and a killer team, we made it happen. Now, to take us through the evening, please welcome Maine Arts Commission Program Director and Dream Maker, Christina Carrez.
I can't see any of you, but wow, there are a lot of you here. If you haven't yet, look behind you. The house is full. So tonight, I thank you all for being here. My name is Christina Carrez. I am the program director for the Maine Arts Commission, and I oversee the Poet Laureate program. Been with the commission now for 4 years. And before we begin tonight's program, I'd like you to consider that we are located on the homeland of the Wabanaki, the people of the Dawn. The Maine Arts Commission recognizes and honors the Abenaki, the Maliseet, the Micmac, the Passamaquoddy, and the Penobscot nations, and all of the Native communities who have lived here for hundreds of generations in this place we now call Maine. On April 3rd, some of you will remember, we gathered at the State House for the second annual poetry celebration in the Hall of Flags, with Governor Janet Mills announcing the appointment of our newest Maine Poet Laureate, Dawn Potter. Dawn will begin her 5-year term in July, and will serve until June of 2031. And Julia will have to just come and hang out with us for the rest of her life. As you've collectively gathered here tonight on this final day of National Poetry Month, and also what I like to call May Eve, for Maine's first Poet Laureate celebration, when you could have been anywhere else, I want to remind you that you and your presence is what makes Maine's writing and creative community what it is today and what it will be for future generations. Some of you may see familiar faces in this room. Hello. And for those who don't know someone next to them, I hope you will introduce yourself to one another and maybe even find a new kindred spirit, friend, through your mutual love of poetry. The state of Maine has been a leader in support of the arts since 1933, where the Maine legislature established the commission, The Arts Commission is funded by the National Endowment for the Arts and by the Maine State Legislature. The Maine Poet Laureate position began under the leadership and tenure of the Executive Director, Alden Wilson, who held the position for 33 years. I don't know if Alden's listening, but thank you for all the work that you've done. So he started the first Poet Laureate in 1995 under the former Governor Angus King, and appointed our first Poet Laureate, Kate Barnes, from 1996 to 1999. Since 1996, we have had 6 poets serve as our state Poet Laureate, including Kate Barnes, Baron Wormster, Betsy Sholl, Wes McNair, Stuart Kestenbaum, and our current Poet Laureate, Julia Bouwsma. Dawn Potter will become our 7th Poet Laureate, and I like numbers, so. And I'd like to thank all of them for being here tonight to share their hearts and their words with all of us. So I've noticed that life sometimes has its own poetic flow, one we don't always understand or seem to understand as we walk down its path. But nevertheless, we carry with us, if we know and allow it, the places and people we need most. And in these times, I say we need poetry more than ever. If you would please join me, Jonas, and the rest of the audience in a collective moment of remembrance to celebrate the memory, the poetic gifts, and spirit of Kate Barnes and Baron Wormster with the lighting of these 2 candles. For Kate Barnes, who served as Poet Laureate from 1996 to 1999, we light this candle in memory of her. And for Baron Wormster, who served as Maine Poet Laureate from 2000 to 2005, we light this candle in remembrance of him. Having transitioned from this world, may their words inspire us and their light remain with us always. To begin this evening's first reading, I have the pleasure to invite Kirsten Lindquist of Camden, Maine, to read The Harrier by Kate Barnes. Welcome, Kirsten.
It's an honor to be here representing Kate tonight. My friend Elizabeth Tibbetts and I worked with her for many years, and Betsy as well, and it seems like we just lost her because she's still always in my head. I chose this poem tonight, The Harrier, in part because before she wrote it, she lived on Appleton Ridge in Blueberry Land. And before she wrote this poem, she was telling me how she had seen a marsh hawk soaring over her blueberry barrens, and we were talking about how amazing they are. And I said, Kate, they've changed the names of those. They're officially called harriers now, and she ran with that. And then the next thing I knew, she was calling me to read me this poem, The Harrier. And just as a bonus, this is for Baron Wormser. The mist disperses and lifts from the field in the whitest feathers, feathers dropped perhaps from the harrier quartering over the brown grass, which already is beginning to green. I think about angels. I wonder if they ever catch mice. Everything is here to accept this morning, to take in, to applaud. The hawk's wide predatory circles, sunlight coming and going, cloud shadows constantly shifting, a toss of rain, and then the line of bare poplars standing ghostly under the slope in a streak of sudden light. But we know there are buds on those pale twigs, and the veils of moisture that hang in the air, visible, invisible. making the hills soft and distant and mildly blue and changeable, like the breath in my body, in and then out, in and then out, as long as it will. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Next, I invite Kathleen Sullivan of Freeport, Maine, reading James Baldwin, Smoking a Cigarette, from Baron Wormster's new book. Please welcome Kathleen.
So good to be here with all of you. Thank you. I want to summon the spirit of Baron. He's only been gone a little while, and maybe he's just over the horizon over there, and just to tell them how grateful I am for how he changed my life in one weekend seminar that I took with him. He opened the whole world of poetry to me, and I'm enormously grateful, as I'll bet many of you are, for ways in which he's touched your heart or your mind with his wonderful spirit and his beautiful words. So right now, and I miss him, I'm going to read James Baldwin, Smoking a Cigarette, which is the title to his book, which was published in 2026 posthumously. So this is the title. Poem. All right. We, the inclusive pronoun feels proper, showing as it does the shared humanity he avowed as an article of something like faith that fraught, preached peace he was brought up with. We see him exhausted yet exultant in his being alive and articulate yet wary of living in a nation between assassinations, since one of those assassinations could easily come his way. Someone looking at the TV and saying, "I've had it with that, and I'm gonna do something about it." We see him inhaling and exhaling, one bright frown after another, one arm wave, then another, cigarette in hand, examining the dry rot of American virtue, word by measured word, pause by reflective pause, rending the shroud of oppression, intent on the messy strictures of truth, testifying to wherever the distances took him, Alabama, Paris, Turkey, the cauldron of prejudicial woe. More history than one lifetime could swallow. We see him inhaling and exhaling, dramatizing both his being here and his speaking, as if the smoke were minutes he was holding onto and then letting go and then holding onto, so that he was a myth as much as he was a man, one of those heroes who grappled with a beast blow by blow, subduing the fear, yet aware another beast must appear, and one after that, animated by lies that have 1,000 lives. We see him lighting a cigarette, that taut moment of self-recognition. We see him nodding as if to say, "Yes, tobacco, my anxious pleasure, while I interrogate disfavor. And you? Do you savor and fear your mischances? Perhaps you wish to instruct me. I have been wised up plenty. It hasn't done much good, though, as the damning condescension of waiting your turn and knowing your place, it wasn't meant to be." We see him creasing his capacious brow as he blows out smoke, as if he were a thought engine, a feeling engine, a dragon engine. More myth. Meanwhile, people remained intractable, And didn't he know it? Wasn't that one more bittersweet hand-me-down, fluent yet laconic, salvation-drenched but sweet street smart? What else was there to do, moment by moment, to still the inner twitch, but pick up another cigarette? Its very lightness as comforting as its timed disappearance to a life lacking in the approved comforts, hence relentlessly, even obstreperously aware, blowing smoke in the blank face of complacency. A full-time job for which he had ideal qualifications that he could even laugh about, born as he was beneath a cloud bank of bad signs. Displays not much promise given his natal circumstances, might have been the report card issued by the powers that be, with a smirk, then a guffaw. Their gilded wheels kept turning while he smoked another cigarette, as if anointing himself amid that sanctimonious din in a concerto of gestures and anti-mumbo-jumbo and counterpoint to his words that some days felt like more smoke, faded to do nothing so much as drift off, less than nothing. Delusion begins with what came to be called. We see him smiling ruefully, yet viscerally appalled. Homeland security. How dare they? But they dared and dared again, while he stared in wonder as the cigarette in his hand, at the cigarette in his hand, and its eventful story.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you both for reading those poems. I invite Jonas to come to the stage, and he's going to introduce to us Betsy Sholl. Jonas.
I thought, oh no, I'm going back to the stage? What's going on here? Hi, Betsy. Welcome. Betsy Sholl, Poet Laureate 2016-2010. I have a little more to say. There are many people who have immense talent, and there are others who have grace. Betsy Sholl is one of the rare few to have both qualities and has displayed these attributes throughout the long arc of her career, bringing people to the poetry and poetry to the people. Betsy has received several poetry awards and fellowships from groups like National Endowment for the Arts and Maine Arts Commission. This is not uncommon for someone with her level of talent, but what I find most impressive about Betsy is that her service to Maine people was uninterrupted by receiving the Maine Poet Laureate honor. Betsy wanted to open doors for women writers, so in 1973, she was one of the founding members of Alice James Books, a nonprofit publishing house at the University of Maine Farmington established with the intent of widening women's access to publishing. This endeavor open doors continues today through her example, her public readings, her mentorship in her writing groups and workshops. Betsy brought the joy of poetry even into our Maine prisons, where joy can otherwise sometimes be in short supply. Betsy has even brought musicians to poetry through her work with people like Gary Whitner and Jim Cameron. Betsy has been prolific in her service to humanity, and that is why she has received the 2020 Distinguished Achievement Award from the Maine Writers and Publishers Alliance, and even an honorary doctorate of humane letters from the University of Southern Maine, bestowed for her significant contribution to the people of Maine. Regarding poetry, Sholl has said that its main purpose is to refresh or renew the language. And toward that end, it is my pleasure to present Maine Poet Laureate Betsy Sholl.
Wow. to meet that person, Betsy Sholl. Thank you to MWPA and the Maine Art Commission and Jonas and the committee and Freeport Folio and this place here. Thank you. And it's just sweet to be here the last day of April with these fabulous poets. And especially, and especially to remember Kate Barnes and Baron Wurmser, both dear friends of mine, poets of great skill and integrity. And also to be welcoming Dawn Potter to the new position. So I'm going to read 3 poems. And the first one is called Widow Walking. I don't want a day when I never think of you, but I would like more in the morning news than another briefing on your absence. I miss hearing my name as summons to a kiss. If we can't step into the same river twice, with the past, it's not even once. Memories are hot watches, knockoffs pinned to the insides of my coat. I open it and become a flasher. At least the wind is wild today, the trees in a frenzy. If I wore a wig, it would be long gone, snagged in the crook of a tree, but good for containing something that starts off fragile, then grows wings. If you are spirit now, can you hear me? Or have you left our flesh too far behind? Somehow, I've landed at the shore where late sun makes the seagrass glow, and for a second, I don't want to hold you or anything, not moonrise in the east or sun gleam in the west, not the path of watery light washing my feet. Still, I can't stop talking to you. Grief is a heavy coat dragging the ground, but death is very cold, so I wear it. So this next poem is more political. It's called Hotel Dieu, which means hostel or hotel of God, and that was the name of medieval hospitals run by the church. Some of them are still in operation. Hotel Dieu. It's easy to gaze at the great cathedrals and not consider that magnificence was created brick by brick on the backs of workers, some broken by the heavy load, some with skills we can't now imagine. Easy also to believe Jesus spoke English if you don't want to trace all the words his words passed through to arrive at us. I'm addressing you, invader of my dream, with your guns and God tattoo, your slow car driving over the daylilies, circling back to mock my lawn sign's love, as if you think it's another conspiracy, a flu shot containing computer chips. In the dream, Jesus, with his Elizabethan English, was saying verily and watch out. Then something I translate as, don't be a room with no doors unless you also have no walls. A crowd gathered. I don't like my therapist saying I have to be every person I dream, even you shouting so angry I wake breathless in a sweat. Fear not, in how many thousand translations. Jesus had been telling a story with more meaning than a hospital has windows. To understand it, he suggested we check ourselves in and look through each one until we're like those builders fitting beam and stone, making something so big They knew it was far beyond them. So. And this last poem, I lived in the Appalachian Mountains for 7 years, 6 of them on a dairy farm. When I moved to Maine, I said to the poets I hung out with, "Oh, I'm going to leave you." And they said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Maine." They go, "Oh, you're just going to Appalachian North." So this is called Clitchhaven Farm. Back in that valley, the corn grew so dense, the stalks closed in, towering over us, until all we could see was a strip of sky and the top of the mountain. Come harvest, the wide field was mowed and space returned. Stubble glittered all the way to the horizon. Crows came with their rowdy conventions. Guinea hens came, always at nap time, and woke the baby. Cows came too. Ambling across the newly opened field, they'd stand so close to our windows, we could smell the cud on their breath. The shock of those broad faces facing us at the flimsy screens all manner of creatures had chewed. It was like staring at ourselves in strange new animal bodies. Later, when the fog hung dense as bed sheets, the air filled with eerie sounds like trains lost and moaning on ghostly tracks. Cows, the farmer said, crying for their babies trucked away in the night. And those low, implacable voices, how could they not seep into some hidden grief we didn't know we had? Even the children would whine and dawdle, not getting ready for school, sensing a runaway woe might tear through the house. But when the fog thinned, sunlight would strike the field like a wand, as if wanting to reveal its hundreds of dew-speckled webs, to uncover the secret workings of earth, which the spiders being part of it all, where the spiders being part of it all mended their nets, broken by wind and dogs, and the cows too, bewildered by grief, milk seeping from their laden sacks, as if seeking a place to go, something to fill. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Let me just adjust that. I'm Noel Tagg. I'm an associate professor of English at the University of Maine at Augusta. And it is my pleasure to introduce Maine's 4th Poet Laureate, Wesley McNair. Serving as Poet Laureate of Maine from 2011 to 2015, Wes worked to amplify poetry among Maine's youth, working class, and rural communities. His weekly column, Take Heart, Conversations in Poetry, elevated Maine poets past and present in 20 newspapers around the state, while his reading series, The Maine Poetry Express, notable for its inclusion of poets from 3rd grade on up, made stops in all of Maine's regions. In one of his many essays on craft, Advice for Beginning Poets, Wes writes, "It is difficult to know and accept the materials your life experience has given you for your poetry. Easier to avoid them as threatening or question them as inadequate. Yet you will have no others. Embrace them. They are the source of your truth and power as a poet." In a career that spans more than a dozen collections of poetry and prose, numerous awards and fellowships, and several anthologies focused on Maine writing, Wes took his own advice, focusing on the everyday people, places, and experiences of northern New England. His poems are populated with comb-overs and aprons and aging bodies, with puppies chained up in dooryards and small towns glimpsed in rearview mirrors. Altogether, his body of work documents a way of life and sensibility that we at once recognize as being of both Maine's past and present, and we hope, future tense. Please help me welcome Wes McNair to the podium.
Thank you, Noel. Thank you, Noel. Is this echoey? Can you hear me okay? Oh, by the way, I want to thank Jonas and Christina and everybody else who put this event together for us tonight. Can I ask for a round of applause for these people? Thank you. Since it's springtime, I want to begin with a poem about spring. But I should tell you about this poem that a while back I used to bring gifts of rhubarb from my patch around to the old timers in my town who knew what it was and what to do with it. But then came along a moment when I had to give up my rhubarb root because all my customers were gone. But then I thought I could write a poem about this and go on the rhubarb root once again. So, the rhubarb root, R-O-U-T-E. On a spring evening, in between the black fly season and the first mosquitoes, as the red stems lift their broad leaves like scores of tilted umbrellas, I call them on the telephone of my mind and drive bagfuls of rhubarb down through the town, past the white revenants of the Grange Hall and the closed library, past the house lots and the treeless modulars where they have no use for rhubarb, turning at last into a wide driveway, while little Herman, alive as anyone, comes out of his old farmhouse with his chesty walk to take 2 bags inside to Fay, enough for a whole year of pies and red Jell-O cobblers. Then drive the back way along the river by the oaks and sumacs gathering the shadows of twilight, to swing in beside the dead school bus of True's cowless farm and see old Billy before his legs gave out, who loved rhubarb almost as much as his long-lost mother, take the biggest bag of it into his arms and carry it up the steps of his porch, leaning on the rail to wave goodbye. Goodbye to Billy. Goodbye to little Herman. Goodbye to the Gagnons, who laughed in the deepening dusk about eating sticks of rhubarb right from the patch as kids. Goodbye to my old neighbor Ethlyn, the house on the corner, empty for 2 years, who all the same calls out, "Hello," from somewhere inside when I knock. "Hello, I'm here." And suddenly, she is here, next to me, behind the screen, smiling, because I remembered her again on this spring evening with fresh rhubarb, which she holds up to her face, breathing it in with a long breath before she turns and goes back into the dark. Well, where would poetry be without love poems? I want to read a couple of those. This one for my wife, Diane. It's about 2 old pear trees that were once planted as mates in our backyard. There was no stopping the old pear tree in our backyard. After we released it from a state cord It stood on the lawn for a month, as if coming to its decision to lie back down on the ground again. All winter, we left it for dead, but in the spring, it lay in an island of unmowed grass, blooming beside its mate. And this May, when I separate their branches and look in, I find new shoots and flowers. At the end of my life, I want to lie down in the long grass with one arm by my side, lifting me up as I reach out to her with all the others, and she reaches back. I want to know nothing but the humming and fumbling of bees, carrying seed dust on their bellies, from my blossoms to her blossoms in the dome of green shade. About 3 years ago, this coming May, I lost my wife Diane to Alzheimer's disease. After being married for over 60 years to her. And of course, it was a bad time, quite a blow. And yet, I also thought about the sheer luck of living with this amazing person for all that time. Loving her, she loving me, and this happened right to the very end for us. So I want to close with this poem that comes right out of the rough and tumble of a long and happy marriage. It's called Getting Lost, and it's about the two of us and a brand new GPS. Getting lost. I'm not proud of it, but I couldn't resist Serena, the British woman on my GPS, who understood I had better things to do while driving than to think about what I was doing, and who had the most charming difficulty with her R's. I went everywhere with her, making each turn she whispered with that lisp of hers into my ear as I watched the man she had made of me on my GPS TV, a superhero in a blue car, taking on the tangle of roads that tumbled out of the horizon, until Diane, my wife and former navigator, who couldn't match Serena's expertise, not to mention her modest compliance, began to resent her. This is true. She says rump instead of ramp, Diane remarked, as I made another perfect exit off the thruway. And that thing she does with her R's is driving me nuts. It was wonderful to be the source of conflict between two women. But then I began to consider how, my destination time in the lower left corner kept adjusting itself according to my speed, a small reminder that in the very moment I was enjoying my triumph over the map, a computer somewhere that knew everything was mapping me. I recall a certain period of melancholy before I returned to my wife. Serena and I had been that good together. I having made so many wrong turns in my life, she only wanting to help me make them right. Yet I couldn't stop longing for, of all things, the fights Diane and I once had about the urgency of finding our way, and the seductive thought of ending up beside some forgotten field among cows on a dwindling road that didn't even exist on the ragged copy of the known world she held in her lap, which was, minus the cows, just where we were 1 week after I unplugged the GPS. And we sat quietly at the roadside, spent by our argument, she turning to me with her blue eyes and that old dear expression of helplessness, I falling in love all over again because there was no Serena to recalculate. Only the two of us together once more, getting lost. Thank you.
Good evening. What a pleasure to be here tonight. Thanks to all of you for being here. My name is Gibson Fay LeBlanc. Happy to be here as a poet and as a person who helps run Maine Writers and Publishers Alliance. If you ever had a chance to visit Haystack during Stuart Kestenbaum's 27-year run as director, or work with him long ago at the Maine Arts Commission, or during his stint at the Maine College of Art, his time as Maine's 5th Poet Laureate, or at Monson Arts, or in some other community setting, I'm guessing two things happened. At some point, Stu shared a poem, and two, you had a phone call or an in-person conversation, and these two things together helped set the tone. And the tone that I have found in Stu's poems and person over the many years I have known and worked with him mixes humility, humor, a hard-won appreciation for craft, and a deep love and respect for fellow humans in all their forms. Stu and I have been exchanging epistolary poems through the mail over the last year and change, and a couple of weeks back, these lines arrived in my mailbox, linking a childhood yo-yo and Yo-Yo Ma. Quote, "That was a still point in a turning world, the same still point where silence waits, like the silence in the cello between the wood and the taut strings. Thank you for also being a still point, Stu. Please join me in welcoming Stuart Kestenbaum."
I could see you before, and now I can't see you. Can you hear me? You're all here. This isn't a dream that I'm on stage with these amazing people who've been inspirations to me throughout my working life. So I was Poet Laureate from 2016 to 2021, and you might recall in 2020 we had a global pandemic. And I, as Poet Laureate, had to write an occasional poem, which was for Maine Statehood Day, March 20th, 2020. So I got it all written, I worked it out, and then the world closed down. So every opportunity I have, I read this poem. And it's the genesis of it was I was looking at beauty salons around Maine, and I just thought that because there are a lot of beauty salons, you know, with names like Curl Up and Die, and somebody told me there's one called Yak and Hack was another one, but you know they're all around. So I thought, well, maybe they're actually it's like a beauty factory in there. They're making beauty, and that's why Maine's so beautiful. Kingdom of Beauty. There are so many beauty salons in Maine. You see them everywhere, in old brick buildings of refurbished downtowns, in strip malls, in trailers in cities and villages. Our beauticians must be doing more than cutting hair. They must be making beauty itself. How else to explain its abundance all around us? The way the first light of morning touches the tops of the spruce trees across the harbor, or a mackerel sky blankets the heavens, or the way the fog drifts over the barnacles working quietly in the waves without us. How else to account for the blue light in the deep snow, the soft drift of fallen apple blossoms in May's air, or the crimson of the blueberry barrens where the glacial boulders work their slow way over the land? Even if our beauticians haven't manufactured all of this, and we gratefully acknowledge the touch of the divine hand wherever we look, they remind us that our hands can help make beauty too. We can see the evidence everywhere, in the circles of burned rubber made by the pickups dancing over the blacktop, in the curve of a canoe's bow rippling a silent lake, in the space inside the split ash basket, in the prayer of a white steeple, in the patched quilt on the bed, in the sure way an elegant knot is tied to hold a load on a trailer. For aren't work and beauty a partnership? Think of the hands that held the chisels and wedges to build foundations of granite block. Let us praise the ingenuity it takes to cut and lift and place ancient stones to bear the weight of the present and the future. 200 years later, a house still standing, faithfully greeting today's light. Well, this is a poem that Wes McNair accepted for the Maine Times. And I think Julia had the same experience. I was called by the clerk of the House in Maine to be clergy of the day for the state legislature. It's a thing they do every time there's a legislative session. A member of the clergy says a benediction, which is why things are as good as they are. If they weren't there, who knows? So, and so I was asked to do it, and they sent me a placard, like a cardboard thing, that said clergy of the day to put in my dashboard so I could park anywhere. And they said that my sermon, or whatever it was, benediction, should be brief and uplifting. It was very touching because I got there and all the legislators stood up when I walked in, and it was like, whoa. I thought, I'm not going to say a prayer. I could be in trouble with some of the legislature. So I said I wasn't a member of the clergy. I was a religion major in college. But I said that I would be reading a poem. And I thought poetry and prayer had similarities in that they both slowed you down and made you pay attention. So this is the poem that I read to them. And they were standing the whole time. You don't have to. It's essence. We hand crank the drill through the maple's bark, pound the metal tap into light inner layers where the sap begins to flow. This lifeblood that will make the leaves unfurl in another 2 months, delicately lined like the hands of a newborn. But now we step over last year's leaves and the years before that in patchy snow to gather what we have taken from the tree, the gallons of sap we boil down on our stovetop, moisture running off the kitchen windows as we get down to its essence, over 3 gallons to make a cup of syrup, so sweet a transformation I can't believe I could have been a part of it, a world that doesn't end in vinegar, ashes, and regret, but in the sweetness that rises every day between earth and sky, traveling from the hole in the side of the tree to our joyous mouths. And then they were still standing, so I said amen, and they sat down. And then one of the legislators from Farmington came up and told me what a bad idea it was to boil down sap in your kitchen, which it was, really. Great way to clean the windows, though. And this last poem I'm going to read is maybe Gibson talked about the time I'd been at Haystack, so it was a long time to be around people who could make things, and I was always envious as a poet, like they can just go in the studio and make a bunch of things, and it's like very tangible. But I began to see words as kind of my making thing, so there was a kind of connection that way. And this is a poem that talks about making and about, I think, our obligation as makers of whatever we make to repair what we can. It's called Holding the Light. Gather up whatever is glittering in the gutter, whatever has tumbled in the waves or fallen in flames out of the sky, for it's not only our hearts that are broken, but the heart of the world as well. Stitch it back together. Make a place where the day speaks to the night and the earth speaks to the sky. Whether we created God or God created us, it all comes down to this. In our imperfect world, we are meant to repair and stitch together what beauty there is. Stitch it with compassion and wire. See how everything we have made gathers the light inside itself and overflows, a blessing. Thank you.
Thanks, Stu. I first knew Julia Bouwsma through her poems, which are both fierce and felt, straight-talking and strange, of the land and the body and out of this world. And I've had the pleasure of working with her over the last 5 years. Julia's Write Me project, in which hundreds of Maine people, mostly strangers to each other, exchange letter poems over a period of months, demonstrates that this is a person and a poet who is paying attention to the people of her town, county, state, country. In our so-called connected world, with its growing divides and disconnection, Julia saw more than 5 years ago that many of us are desperate for real exchange right now, person to person, wherever we happen to be. She believes deeply in the give and take at the center of healthy communities, and her truck has the miles on it to prove that. Like the Poets Laureate before her, she has tirelessly, on tires, crisscrossed Maine. In the title poem of her new book, Death Fluorescence, speaking both to a roundworm and to each of us, Julia writes, quote, "Within you is an entire universe of starry, luminescent decay, a webwork of indigo highways connecting each galaxy to another, where there is nothing left to do but step forward, step out into the ocean, gemstone, peacock, dragonfly, planet, ribbon, eel. This horizon you are and are not yet without." Please join me in welcoming Julia Bouwsma.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction, Gibson. I've been sitting here trying to, rethinking what I was planning to read. With everything that comes out of someone's mouth, I think, well, actually, I should read this. So. We'll see what happens. This first poem is the first poem that I was asked to write as Poet Laureate. So when I became Poet Laureate, I was incredibly excited, and I was also terrified because I thought that then I would have to write public poems, and I didn't know how to do that. So this was my first attempt. This is a poem that was included in the state's bicentennial time capsule. To a Mainer living 100 years from now. The other day I stood beneath an ash tree as old as the time between my writing this letter and you reading it. Inside the green moment of the forest, I traced my finger across the ash's trunk. Grooved bark staggered like vertebrae. A deer bent back to listen, quiet flanks reddening the stillness before crouch became bolt, and it leapt into a lattice of blackberry cane and brush. Tell me, unknown friend, what has dissipated from our home and what remains? Does it still snow hard enough to swallow your footsteps in light? Do you drink sap each spring, boil your sorrow into new waft and gold? We lived here at the edge of the old rituals, lived there until we could not discern our hope from our fear. Wildfire smoke smeared a low brow of bruise, a language written in billowing keloids and contrails, vanishing welts of vapor. Are you still repeating our same old violences, or have you learned new ones? Can you wring a chicken's neck with your hands, twist and pull the throat in unison as my grandmother's grandmother did, and I do now? Or have you colonized Mars, erected skyscrapers of cosmic concrete? Scientists are at it now, discovering a building material of human tears, sweat, urine, blood. It hardens fast and cheap, stronger, they say, than anything we've ever known before. For you, I wish nothing but birdsong. I wish you a pond of peepers screaming spring thaw. And all those apple trees I planted, it's early autumn now, their striated skin seeping blush into white flesh as they ripen. Do they still stand on this hill? Pick one for me, please, if they do. Bite down among stippled wormholes and taste our blinding sweetness. So I was going to read the poem that I wrote as my clergy of the day situation. But then I started rethinking it because I realized that I didn't get the memo on it being brief. And mine's a little bit long. So I'm trying to decide here. I think I'm going to read a different poem instead. But I will tell you that a trick I discovered when you weren't sure how to write a public poem, and I had to write one because I didn't have anything uplifting enough, right? So I had to write one. And I was uncomfortable writing uplifting poems, so what I did was I decided, I needed a party trick. So if anyone has to write an uplifting poem, I suggest writing it in a really complicated, hard form, because then you can be as sentimental as you want. You can get away with it. All right, so I wrote a sestina, and that became a trick every time I had to write a public poem. It's, well, if I write it as a sestina, that I can be sentimental. But I am going to read something else. This is a poem about the necessity of art in challenging times. But it began from watching a YouTube video of a British violinist receiving brain surgery, and she was asked to play the violin while she received surgery to make sure that she would still be able to. What will you do at the end of the world? When I watch the video where the violinist plays as surgeons cut the cancer from her brain, my first impulse is to descend into metaphor, to imagine the plaintive cry of her violin as a singular silvery thread that leads the surgeon sublimely, tremulously through the Minotaur's maze so they can extract the tumor abutting the lobe that controls her left hand, so they can navigate the fleshy labyrinthine folds and electric shocks that make a human mind. When I watch her bow graze the ventilator tube again and again, I recollect the old story of Nero playing as Rome burned, which is supposed to be a story about callous cruelty and ineffectual leadership, but which fails to hold up under historic scrutiny for many reasons, including that the violin was not invented until the 11th century. Still, the fable lends him more humanity than not, the notion that there was music inside him, even if it took 6 days of burning to fan it out. A music so powerful it forced itself to escape his tyrant's mouth. If art is only pleasure, Nero's act is selfish, loathsome, but if art is survival, A violin siren might morph to beacon against the smoky air. I keep asking my poems what the world needs from me in these days of quickening dread, of burgeoning conflagration, what they want me to do. In the comments section below the hospital video, no one can agree on what they're seeing. Creepy, incredible, horrifying, beautiful. Afterward, the violinist recalls, I kept thinking, get out of my way. I need to play louder. So I'm going to finish with something new. People have started asking me what I plan to do with all the extra time I'm going to have. And the answer is that I've taken up powerlifting. So this poem is about my love for the deadlift. And I very loosely using the ghazal form, which is a 7th century Arabic form. So there's some repetition in it that's part of that form. Ode to the deadlift. This is reverence. Hands chalked, belt locked, I stand at the bar. Someone has taped an orange post-it to the window. Behind it, bars of light from passing cars catch in snow-thick darkness. Language collapses and swells air inside my lungs. I'm strong, I whisper. The bar glints up at me. Ignore its question. Repeat, I am strong. I can do this. As I gulp air, then hinge back at the hips, grab a hold of the bar, let my arms go long, breath pushing belly into belt, and all I have to do is get up and not let go, and already the question is lost. Bar rolling up my shins, answer driving back into the floor with a surety I have never before felt about anything, because always I barred the door, braced against disappointment, bullied myself for more. My mother warning, be careful, you're not exactly. My father with a bar stool, look in his eyes, but there is a music to this, a rhythm I've always known, refrain that uncoils now from dormancy, the opening bars joyfully emerging from my tone-deaf throat, muscles stretching into a trail of bruises I'll trace with my finger in the mirror later. Here the bar grazed my knee, here the belt pinched, each mark a new word for trust. Mantra I'll tap into the web of my thumb, body electric with tension, bar before me like the line of a poem I've already written, will write again as I name, rename myself, claim myself, rise, hands clenched to the bar. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. I have the distinct honor of introducing Dawn Potter. Dawn is going to be our 7th Poet Laureate. She directs poetry and teaching programs at Monson Arts, which is a rural community if you don't know, and offers online classes through the Poetry Kitchen. Author or editor of 10 books of poetry and prose, most recently the collection Calendar. She was a finalist for the National Poetry Series, and her memoir, Tracing Paradise, won a Maine Literary Award in nonfiction. And I might be a bit of a fangirl of Dawn. She didn't know me, but she does have a daily online blog, so you could find out what she's doing each morning for the rest of the day. And so, I got to get a little sneak peek into her life. But the first time I ever heard about Dawn Potter, I was in Monson Arts at a commission meeting, and they were talking about the work that she was doing. And I thought to myself, my God, if I had had a Dawn Potter in my high school, I might have known that I was a poet before I was 35. And so I believe that Dawn Potter is what Maine needs and what Maine kids need. And I am thrilled that she is our next Poet Laureate, and I can't wait to hear what she's going to read to you.
Thank you, Christina. It's so amazing to be here with these people who I've known like my whole adult life, this group of people just coming through. And when I published my first book, I got a postcard in the mail from Kate Barnes, who I had never met, telling me she liked my book. I mean, what a gift. Baron Wormser was my teacher, and he used to say, you gotta use your stuff. And I was thinking about listening to all these readers and what is their stuff? What stuff do we have in common? And I think what I hear of their stuff is such a love for lives and such a curiosity about them. Not just their own inner lives, which are there, but the lives of everyone outside, this curiosity, the imagined lives, stepping into other people's lives. It's such an honor to be with them. So I'm going to read a couple of poems that play with lives. This first poem I always have to read when I'm with Betsy, mostly because she asks for it. So, this poem quotes from a sonnet by the Elizabethan poet Sir Philip Sidney, and it also imagines the moon, which is classically imagined as female, imagined as male. What happens if you make it a guy? Moon poem. The winter moon dangles among the branches like a half-flat basketball, and I say to myself, I am tired of writing moon poems. This is the third one this week. The problem is that the moon is so interesting, the way it sulks in the sky, cheeks pouting like a baby's, and on another night it's an egg rolling off the edge of a counter, and then a toenail clipping a gleam on the tile. The moon is like that roommate who always pays the rent late, but not late enough to get kicked out. The one who fills the refrigerator with bottles of milk he never drinks. The moon is made of green cheese. He mumbles and puffs a stratosphere's worth of pot smoke into the front hall. This guy with his long with love-acquainted eyes. I forgive him everything, but can he clean a bathroom? Of course not. Have you noticed how grubby the moon is? All that caked-on dirt and 3-day stubble, all that languished grace. I'm going through some things, explains the moon. Have I told you about my mom, asks the moon. Can I borrow $100? I'll pay you on Friday, promises the moon. If it's that time of the month, he'll spend 23 hours a day in his room with the door shut, muttering pale laments and plucking time's arrows from his breast. The moon is unevictable. He is here to stay. And once in a while, he even washes a dish or two, and his smile is mournful and gorgeous, like Paul Newman's, and his laundry is all over the couch. With how sad steps, O moon, thou climbst the skies, and with how wan of face. I Venmo him his $100, and I push his dirty socks into a corner with my foot, and I worry that daylight will arrive before he knows it, before I know it. I cry out, wait, O moon, stop, O moon, oh wait, and pardon earth's ungratefulness, but alas, he has his headphones on and will not hear me. Alas, alas, he is always out of reach. So I've lived in Maine for most of my life, but most of the time I've been in Maine, I was way up in Somerset County, living in the woods where I raised my kids up there, and then 10 years ago, I moved to Portland, and it was really hard, you know? I felt like I didn't have anything to do. Like, where's the wood to chop down? And so during the pandemic, I really was where I think I began to figure out how to love my neighborhood. I live in Portland now, so this is a little hymn to where I live now. This is Concord Street hymn. Jean is standing on her stoop with her doddering chow, Teddy, and I'm trying to decide if I can pretend I don't see her. Jean has a shout like a blue jay's, and she specializes in the unanswerable. Dawn, she hollers now, I can't recognize you if you're not wearing a hat. Meekly, I halt and admire her daffodils. I dug them up by mistake, she barks. Now I don't have a one. Next door, at the Lobsterman's ranch house, there is no shouting. The license plate on his pickup is the only information available. Otherwise, shades drawn tight, a note to the mailman taped to the door, a needle on the front sidewalk, and daffodils bobbing along the foundation. Yes, there will be daffodils in every stanza of this poem because it is spring in Maine, and all people, except for teenagers, are still wearing their winter coats. And the maples in the backyards are bare-armed wrestlers, and the gutters are scarred with sand and cigarette butts, and the breeze kicks up from the ocean, making us lift our muzzles like hounds. Oh, wind and salt! Daffodils tremble in the yard of the pro bono lawyer, tremble among the faded plastic shovels of her children. A woodpecker shouts among the bald maples, and Jean maligns me. I don't know why you're outside so much. You don't even have a dog. She makes me feel like dirt, but that's not so bad. A swirl of sea gale buffets the chimneys. Twigs clatter onto Subarus. Daffodils, yellow as eyes, breast the wind. Earth is thawing. They shout, and I, on this half-green bank, unfurl. I'm going to read one more from the new collection I'm working on. Traveler. He asked the barmaid, how much? But she was busy listening to a guy trying to sell burner phones, so he dropped a few bills on the counter and walked out into night air. He was somewhere in Pennsylvania, and stars blinked faintly behind the humid haze, but still, he glimpsed Orion's belt. He could trace the simple frame of the Dipper. He could hear traffic on the turnpike growling like an old clock getting ready to strike. And he saw the parking lot unroll before him, a blackened field, big rigs lined up like cows in a barn. He remembered those Holsteins, hulked in their stanchions, all sigh and shadow. And he had to smile at himself, always losing today in the tall grass. He wanted another drink, but he had a long way to drive. He wanted another life, but this was his weedy row to hoe. He thought of calling his wife, but his battery was almost dead. He imagined curling up in the back seat of his car and never getting to where he was supposed to be. He imagined where he was supposed to be, but instead traveled back, far back, to his mother. She pins shirts on a line. Sunlight gilds her broad face. There is no world like the one we don't know how to forget. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Let's give another round of applause for all of our Maine Poet Laureates. We're going to shift now into a question and answer portion of the program. There are some microphone runners out in the audience, so you'll want to talk into the microphone. So we're going to open the floor for audience questions first. There's a question in the front here, at the third row, in the middle.
Hi. I was interested, Julia, in your use of more formal poetry, you know, thinking of...
It's hard to hear you.
Oh, is this on? Yeah. Okay. All right. I was interested in your use of more formal, more forms in your work. And it seems to me that that's much less frequent than it used to be. And I wonder how people on the stage feel about adopting forms like the sonnet or sestinas or, I don't know, an Arabic form in this day and age. Is this something that you find congenial or completely out of date?
I can speak to that. I didn't happen to read any formal poems tonight, but I write in sonnets a lot. And I think form and structure is really important. It creates a kind of interesting sort of fence where you have all this freedom inside it. And each form is a different kind of fence. And it's also, I think, feeds into me for free verse, which is an invented form, really. I mean, each poem that is so-called free verse has its own structure that's asking to be made. So I think form is very alive.
Wes.
I've been mulling this one. It's a hard question, pretty open. But I often think if I had to start over again, I'd teach creative writing in a whole different way, poetry writing. Yes, it's fun to have line breaks that work, but I think that that American craft books are dealing with technique usually, and they're not dealing with where poetry really comes from. It comes from life, often pain and despair, whether you're writing cheerful poems or not. It comes from wanting to say something so deeply that if you had a stick only and a stone, you'd figure a way to make a poem out of it. It comes from being hurt. So often it's true. I mean, that's the reason why Emily Dickinson, you may not know this, but Emily Dickinson couldn't tell time until she was a teenager because her father was so gruff with her and so angry when she didn't get it, probably tried teaching her too young, that she never dared to ask again or figure the whole thing out until she was a teenager. Poets are often misfits, they're misunderstood, they're just different kinds of people. But where poetry begins, though, is with life. I just finished a book of essays on this. It's called Living Twice, essays about poetry and life. I think I would advise, you'd have to do it with talking to students at conference and all that kind of stuff. But I'd want to start with, not with technique first, but with whatever suffering or trauma or joy that people actually feel, because language really is about feeling, and it goes pretty deep into intuition and instinct. I'd figure out through conference what these people are like, through conversations. I used to do a lot of conversations with students, and I suppose anybody here who's been a teacher has done that. But I'd get to know a student, and then I would teach from there, and we would just start off with the subject matter of the lives they've lived, and go from there.
You know, I think with with form, I think every poem has its own strategy and needs a certain thing. Just like if you're making an object, there's certain things it can do, it can't do, it needs to do. So I think form can evolve naturally out of that. But I think it's, if you've had a poem that hasn't worked, that you know when form doesn't, because you can build it and you can just take one thing out and it's like Jenga, you know, and it's gone. But the work that went into the poem is still there and comes back.
I tend to think about form as a container, right? And I'm often most interested in it when I'm overfilling the container and I don't know what's going to happen to the container, right? So if Wes is talking about the emotion, right, the heart that we have to pour into the poem, then I'm often interested in what will happen if I pour too much. And what will happen to will it warp? Will it, right, I picture if I'm, very hot water into a plastic yogurt container, and will it warp, or will it break under the weight? Will some new form emerge? So I love to use form, but I'm often really interested in, transgressive uses of form, or when the form changes or yields a new form.
For me, if I get too self-conscious about making a form, I've lost the poem. I tend to listen to sound and tend to try to get a sense of where the poem might go. And then if it seems like a form or a transgressed form, will help. I'll try that, but somehow for me, it has to be organic. It has to be organic, and sound is pretty important. Voice.
I think you learn to listen to your poems, and then they'll tell you what they need, right? But I think it takes a long time to learn to do that sometimes.
Yeah.
Question down here in front in the third row. Oh, they're there. No, go ahead. That's fine.
Oh, thank you. So I had the privilege of having Gibson Faye LeBlanc as my 11th grade English teacher, and it just blew me open to what words can do in terms of the human experience, understanding what it means to be human. And I was wondering if you could speak to teachers, whether formal or informal, who kind of invited you into seeing yourself as a poet, or seeing yourself as a writer, or seeing yourself as someone who could kind of understand what it's like to be you through words.
I'll tell you a story. I don't know if this quite answers your question, but when I was very, very young, just out of school, I was living in Cambridge, and I signed up for a Harvard summer school class taught by this West Coast poet named Ron Lowenson, who was very experimental. And it was the first time I ever paid for education. So I was going to get my money's worth, right? So every time that guy had office hours, I was at his door, which he seemed to enjoy. Nobody else ever went to see him. So, but, and we had a great talk, a great rapport. We kind of became friends. But the very last day, before he was going back out west, I stood in his doorway, just kind of, and I said, "Ron, can I write?" And he leaned back, he had a swivel chair, he swiveled around and goes, "I don't know, can you?" and then he said to me, "Don't ever give that power to anyone else." And I was used to giving that power to somebody else. I wanted validation. So I just, that stays with me. He was a great teacher, too. He made us want to write. He made us feel willing to fail, which is another part. Try again. Try, fail. failed again, failed better. So he was a great teacher.
And I worked for the Maine Arts Commission back when it was the Maine State Commission on the Arts and Humanities. I coordinated the literature programs, and one of the things I got to do is put together the NEA, and it's called Writers in the Library, and we had, initially it went from Holton to Orono to Augusta to Portland, and it'd be a series of people reading, and it changed venues. It pretty much went north to south. And Bill Carpenter, who was one of the founding faculty at College of the Atlantic, was one of the people we invited. A literature panel, advisory panel, came up with a list, and I invited Bill. And I remember hearing him read, and I just thought it was a moment in my formation as a writer. I'd written before that, obviously, but it was a moment when I thought, wait, you can do that in a poem? If you know Bill's poems, you really know that for real. But it was one of those moments that just shook me, because I thought, just realizing, it's like, I think it happens when you see students connect with a teacher, and you just think, wait, I can do that. I can be the person I've imagined I can be, or I have a voice, I can use my voice that way. And I certainly, from the laureates before me, have benefited from that too, from hearing their voices when there's a moment when you say, wow, how did they get from here to there? Can I find a way? Can I do that with my own work? Can I get from here to there in a way that surprises me?
I was just thinking of a story for some reason. You know, the best things come into your head as poets know, when you're thinking off the grid. You know, you're hearing everything coming in, but all of a sudden there's this crazy association, you don't know where it came from. So I'll just tell you the story about Albert Pinkham Ryder, you know, the American artist who painted those ships, boats lost at sea. There's always this shining orb up in the sky, and the sea is tormented and so forth, lots of darkness, interplay of light and dark, quite dramatic paintings. And you have to know Ryder. I mean, it's been hard to preserve his paintings because he would paint with anything. He was pretty poor, so his paintings are famous for cracking and mystifying curators. But anyway, he didn't care about that. So somebody asked, Mr. Ryder, I noticed those shining orbs in your paintings. Is that daytime or nighttime? And he said, I never thought of it. We're getting to the point where that the way artists think, I feel, well, maybe I should say the way I think, but I've known a lot of poets and so on and read their work, but I think that they think differently. They're not so interested in all the techniques of getting to one place to another. They just think off that kind of grid. And I'd much rather talk to Albert Pinkham Ryder than most teachers of creative writing, to tell you the truth, because I think you get closer to where creation comes from. But I don't know where they came from. So I think maybe since I just dropped in from Mars, maybe I'm off subject, but we'll have to go with that.
I worked with Baron Wormser. I didn't go to graduate school at all. I've never taken a graduate course, and so Baron was really my only poetry teacher per se, and he worked me hard. He worked me really hard. But one thing he also did was there are things that in my writing, even when I was at a really deeply apprenticed stage, that he said, I don't need to tell you anything, you know what you're doing there. And that didn't mean that I was doing it perfectly or I couldn't get better, but he was really good at saying, there's a space that you don't need me, and I don't need to mess around with it. That's your space. And I think it goes a little to what Betsy was saying of the sense of having a teacher that is both demanding but wants you to step into your own power that is just, it's just an incredible gift.
Haven't we been incredibly wise?
Thank you. So I'm a former undergraduate student of Wes's. I'm taking a class with Stuart and his wife this summer, which I'm really excited about. And I still write poems, but 2 years ago I went from being a high school librarian where I had a job largely confined to this space to being an elementary school librarian where I am on 4 classes a day, publicly facing, doing activities, constantly engaging, being watched, being looked at. And so when I come home, I'm really, really, really tired. And then I have to feed my cat and feed myself and get ready for the next day. And so I'm not writing as diligently as I have in the past. And I know all of you have had day jobs as a librarian, as professors, as directors of agencies. And my question is, how do you find that lovely balance? Because I can write on my breaks, I can write sometimes on the weekends, but during my week, my head is just percolating with all of the things I've said and done and have to say and do. And so I lose my ability to be the person who is that introspective, thoughtful person.
I think the first step, at least for me, because I have no sense of balance. So rather than answer the question, how do you find a sense of balance, what I'm going to tell you is, how do you be a poet even when you have no sense of balance? And so I think the first thing is knowing that you're a poet, no matter whether you're writing or not, right? You know, not thinking about something like writer's block, right? Not worrying about that. You're a poet no matter what. That's the way you process the world around you. And so when you're not writing, you're still writing. And it's happening inside you. It's just not making its way out of you yet, right? So I believe in something called the coiled spring. I think that the poems will build up in me. And when, you know, they're just knocking at the edge of my head saying, let me out, I will find some concentrated time and I will do it. But I do, you know, I live off-grid. I do a lot of farming and work like that. And if I'm in the garden, you know, if I'm splitting firewood, I understand at this point that those are all ways that I'm writing poems, right? So I think about the things you do that really are poems also. And have faith, right? And then when they're really, you know, if they're really good poems, they're going to burble out of you no matter what. Yeah.
And be less demanding of yourself. And it's not quantity. It's grab 2 words and you got 2 words, right? When I first started writing poems, I only did so because I had a 1-year-old that would not take a nap. And I was crazed. I couldn't get any space to myself, and all I could do was like sit him down, give him a block, put a piece of paper on his back, and write 2 words. And I was like, they belong to me and not to you. And it was not a poem, but it became poems because I developed a way to sort of eventually pull out more. So it was like the chaos was a place for me to steal time within the chaos. So yeah, just write a list while you have all those kids in the library with you. Just write a list, and it belongs to you and not to them, you know? Don't call it a poem, it's just words, it's just yours.
Wes, you? Want to have a time check, Jonas? I think there's someone with a question right in front of you. Yeah, time check. Oh, it's
time.
It's time to stop? Nobody wants to stop talking to the poets. One more question.
Oh, 2.
I have one here. I would like each one of you to mention the poet who has been most influential and important to you without further explanation. And then secondly, if you had to recommend a late 20th or early 21st century poet to a young person, whom would you mention?
Wow. We gonna go in order?
Oh, man.
The rookie goes first.
This is hazing.
It's like a hazing, isn't it? Yeah.
Who is very influential to you that you
Um, I'll start with the second one next. Among the poets, when I work with my high schoolers that I have found to be among the most biggest surprise that how much they fall in love with this poet, it's Sappho. My high schoolers love Sappho. And it's not, they're not hunting for sex or anything in there. It's just like like something that is just pure feeling in 4 words. They can't believe it exists. It surprises them so much. Teenagers are full of feeling, but they're also really wordy, and they don't know that, like, this idea of compression and how you can get it that way, it shocks them. So I would say, using Sappho with high schoolers, I'm all for it. It's really good. Now it's your turn.
Oh, I'm sort of losing track of the question, so I'm gonna say that a text that was extremely influential on me early in my life is Dante's Inferno, which was read to me when I was about 9 years old, and which I became so obsessed with that I kept a copy in my locker and would read like really gory bits out to other people, which was not a great social skill. But that intensity, I think it's something, that desire for that level of intensity, and also the idea of the poem as a journey, are things that I think continue to inform my work.
Well, I'm gonna pick Pablo Neruda. And the second one was, John, was a poet you'd recommend to somebody now. Wisława Szymborska.
Boy, that was brief.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I'm a poet. Who was the Polish poet who's won the Nobel Prize in literature.
Wonderful.
And
Szymborska.
Szymborska,
Yeah.
who said, and I think this is she makes a distinction between poets and demagogues in her Nobel Prize address, which is amazing. And she says the difference is that a poet and a scientist and an artist is always saying, I don't know. And a demagogue knows exactly where and I believe most demagogues are men, where he's going. Is that longer?
No, that's a good thing to remember, though. Let's see, since I'm the senior person here, I can say this, that I actually wrote an essay for that book I told you about. I'm not hustling it, it's not out. But I've come to think that I don't really have a favorite. What I've been doing all my life, without even understanding this, I've been enamored of certain poets in certain periods, and over time what I've done is to adopt a lot of kindred spirits that have helped me to do or think various ways, or sort of kept me curious about saying stuff and doing stuff on the page. I know this for a fact because I decided I would take up the subject of literary influence, which sounds boring as hell, doesn't it? I always thought it was boring too, but I came to realize, though, that there was this unfolding me that came from a lot of favorite poets in different periods of my life. So I was finally assembling this sort of colony, and they were my tribe, helped me in different ways. And I think maybe that's the way it is for all of us. I'm not positive, but that can be a very boring question. I used to be bored to tears by that question. When somebody asks you, what are your influences? Because you don't carry a list of them in your head. But on some level, you're taking it all in. If you're born to be a poet, and you just keep on reading, and eventually There are an awful lot of influences, but what makes you original is that you found a combination between and among these people who's you. But reading poetry and getting excited about it, different kinds of poetry, is extremely important for any developing writer, I think.
I think about poets I go back to, and one is the late Bridget Kelly. She's someone I knew a little bit personally, and I've admired her work and her integrity. I'm actually in Canto 27 of Purgatory right now. I cycle through Dante regularly. Czesław Miłosz was a poet who really, you know, he didn't influence me to write like him, but he influenced me to understand a larger world than the American world, you know, and to understand history in a new way, and that was vitally important to me. I don't know who I would recommend to a kid. Maybe Neruda, just, you know, because of the metaphors and the ability to be both politically astute and also celebratory. But I taught fourth grade girls one year, and I read them a Sappho poem, and they loved it. They wrote it down and took it home. Yeah.
Amazing in schools.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all. Give them a round.
You had a question.
I'm going to invite Jonas up to give final remarks, but before I do that, I just want to thank the camera crews and give a shout out to the live stream, because there are people watching all over the nation and all over the state this evening's poetry. So thank you for being here. I'd also like to thank my colleague Ryan Layton, who's down here in the front taking all the photos. Ryan will be sharing all this on our social media, and Ryan's a poet himself. He doesn't call himself that, but I'm calling him that because he shares all of our communications and writes all of our stories, and really what he's doing is he's writing all of your stories. Thanks, Ryan. And lastly, I want to end where I began, which is to tell you to turn to the people around you and meet someone new, meet a new friend tonight. If you go get a book signing, talk to the people in line and find out where they're from, find out who their favorite poet is. And again, I thank you all for being here so much.
I can see that everybody's ready to get their butts out of those chairs, so I'm going to skip the stuff I had prepared for you to say and just let you know, thank you, you are welcome. Now, to close the evening, we'd love to have you join us and the poets next door in the gallery, for there's a book sale and a book signing, and I'm very excited about that. And I would just like to say that I would like to leave you with the idea of being the light you want to see this spring, and awaken those dull roots, enjoy the lilacs, and let's get going. Thank you.